Thank you so much, Fran, for meeting with me.
Thank you.
And before we talk about the details of your work, can you tell me what is the earliest memory you have of hearing about or thinking about nonviolence, ahimsa, as an ideal or a practice or a phenomenon?
Gosh, that is an extraordinary question. Because I think that it is always something that I approached, but I'm going to share a story that I always tell. It's sort of two-sided. And one is two-sided. When I was quite small, I was in kindergarten. I have two older brothers. And one evening, my father came home from his work, and he called the three of us into the backyard. And he said to us, I've become aware that there are other children in our neighborhood who are disrespecting and actually physically harming the older people in the neighborhood and children who are younger than they. And he said, when you see this happening, I want you to approach and ask these your peers, the kids your age, to stop. Because this is wrong. This is not how we treat the elderly. This is not how we treat children that are younger and smaller than us. He said it's got some implications on, he said, I know you're little, but it's got some implications on how they feel about themselves, that they have to pick on others and say rude things and that kind of thing. And he said, however, if your logic and gentle approach doesn't work, I'm going to teach you how to fight. Because it's important that you know how to A, protect yourself, and B, make sure that the situation stops. So I've only once used and then he did. He showed us how to make a fist, and we had some practice rounds, and then he lined us up again, like little stair steps, the three of us. And he said, now that I've shared this with you, I'm going to tell you, number one, I never, ever, ever want the story to come back to me that any of the three of you have turned into the bully. Ever. And I'm going to also tell you, I never want to hear that you started a fight you couldn't finish and ran for help. Now, I only once used that advice, and that was when I was in the 4th grade, and I was with my good friend Linda O'Connor and my little brother, and we had made this fort, and we were pretending we were Pony Express riders, and we had this little, anyway, we were unaware that some 7th graders, 3 boys, had discovered our fort and were using it to smoke cigarettes. And they arrived while we were making our campfire, our pretend campfire. And one of the older boys said to us, you need to get out of here, blah, blah, blah. And he picked my little brother up, who was in kindergarten, and he threw him out. I was like, and I jumped right up. That was the only time that I used. And I said, you have to stop that, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't swing at him, but he swung at me. But anyway, broke my nose, and that was a whole other story. But I was so afraid that I would be in trouble because I had started a fight I couldn't finish, in my mind. Mm-hmm. And I went home and I explained it to my father, and he was super, super proud of me that I had stood up exactly as he had asked. That I was like, you cannot treat my brother like that, just because you're bigger, and 7th grade and 5, come on, why, in my small mind, in my 4th grade mind, I understood the inequity of being such a bully, and also that they had sort of usurped our little world.
Yes.
It was our make-believe world, and, and we had done all the work, and then they had just walked in. So there were so many lessons in that story. And when my father passed, a friend of mine, a very good friend, asked me, she was just asking me about him. And I shared that story, and she looked at me and she said, and you've always been that little girl. The little girl who stepped in and said, no, I won't accept this. And making a difference, and not, using your fists in a way that is metaphorical rather than literal. Like, this is wrong, and this is plan A, and if that doesn't work, I'll go to plan B. And, and it certainly helped me as an educator, and it helped me as an artist, it's helped me as a woman, as a friend. So that's a very long story. So
no, but
anyway.
It's beautiful. How did this childhood experience then later merge with your understanding and appreciation of Martin Luther King and Gandhi and the whole political nonviolence stream of life?
I have to say, and I'm going to go back to my childhood, obviously I'm a baby boomer. And I remember there was so much time when we were small that the airwaves on TV and the books and the magazines were all about World War II. And one night, my father and I were watching the news at 6:30. And African American students were trying to integrate, or being integrated, into a school in the South. And they were being protected by the National Guard, and there were tanks in the street. And I turned to my father and I was like, that's war. Do you know, like, in my mind, that's war. And they just want to go to school. It really had an incredibly strong influence on me that young people, a little bit older, some of them in the same grade I was at the time, in order to reach their place of education, and which we are all entitled to in the United States, needed this kind of protection. It really deeply touched me. And later, as I became clearly aware of Martin Luther King, the Million Man March, and his I Have a Dream speech, all of that, Robert Kennedy, discovering Mahatma Gandhi and the work that he had done, the Danes during World War II, Lech Walesa. Do you know, like, these individuals were able to make a huge impact on themselves, their small community, which was work, and then the broader community, and then their country, and then the world stage. There was this huge ripple effect that approaching something with a clean heart, a bright mind, and a positive vision for change was something that inspired me, and also made me feel very anchored and secure that there were individuals who were passionate about making a change in a way that, I guess, went back and reflected what my father said, that we always want to use our words, and if not, then we need to back those up. In my case, the choice was to back them up with passionate activism rather than a good punch. But yeah, does that answer that?
It does beautifully. How did then this lead to you were initially a theater person, right?
No, I was initially a visual art major.
Oh.
And I wanted to go to graduate school in drawing and get my master's degree in drawing and change the world through audiences experiencing my views of life and how I was interpreting the different day-to-day political, religious, cultural events that were happening in our world in whatever decade I was in at the time. And I got a job to earn money to go to graduate school on the south side of Chicago teaching elementary school art. And it was a tough neighborhood, and it was a tough job. And within 2 weeks, as I learned how to, do classroom management and organize daily lessons and make sure that it was scaffolded, and I started to include, writing out the assignment in step-by-step directions and giving those to 2 kids at a time so that they could be helping each other and I could move around. I mean, it was extraordinary what I learned in 2 weeks or 3. And I understood that if I was using the incredible vehicle of art, I was being an artist in the classroom every day. And from that day in 1972 until Denver in 1994, I stayed on that path. And it was an extraordinary journey. And I taught elementary school art, and then I taught high school photography in Denver, and then I taught theater arts also in Denver. Mm-hmm. So it was this transition, but always within the arts.
Yes.
And then I came to New York, and on sabbatical leave in 1994, the fall of 94, and never looked back. I became the education director at the Women's Project Theater and at the Atlantic Theater Company. And all of this work, working in these marginalized areas, although I'm sure that some of the kids in Denver are like, led me to this deep understanding that these young men and women of all ages and personalities and religions and ethnicity and bright and articulate and resilient and hopeful, were also struggling every day against the negativity and disrespect and the prejudgment of the world around them. And I decided in 2006 to make a documentary called Bethlehem to Brooklyn, Breaking the Surface. And I brought together young men and women from Brooklyn, New York, and Bethlehem, Palestine. And they did this writing together, and then they put those pieces together for a performance. And when we finished, and I asked them, what did you get out of this experience? They said the same thing, each one of them, no matter what community they came from. That the world looked at them as if they had nothing to contribute. And they had shown through this experience that they were extraordinary. Not just because they did deep and thoughtful, brilliant writing, and then crafted that into a very lovely performance. They had become friends when nobody believed they could. And they wanted to continue building that bridge with every kid, everywhere, no matter their race, religion, or attitude. Myself and the audience who heard this in the talkback after the performance, each and every one of us were completely gobsmacked. If you are 16, 18 years old, and you have this depth of empathy and equity and trust and vision, I had no choice. My back was to the wall, but to ask them for their permission to take that vision of every kid everywhere, no matter their race, religion, or attitude, and see how far we could take it. And they said yes. So in 2012, I started Breaking Walls. I got the money together in 2012 for our first summit in Berlin. We took new writer performers from Brooklyn and Bethlehem to Berlin, and the kids, the young people from the documentary were our ambassadors and helped run the program. It was extraordinary. It was extraordinary, and that's where Breaking Walls came from.
So can you tell me from the beginning how the idea of Breaking Walls took shape? The experience from Brooklyn and Bethlehem, how did you turn that into a structured exercise that you are now able to take to different parts of the world?
Another excellent question. Well, I had this structure from having worked at the Women's Project, where I developed a program called 10 Centuries of Women Playwrights.
This Women's Project was
It's
where?
here in New York.
At the theater?
Yes, at their theater.
Okay.
And it involved young people reading plays written by women, and we would read them in the historical context, and then discuss the themes of that particular time period and how they related to each of us now in our own contemporary lives. 1995, I was there from 1995 to 2008. And then they would either write small group plays or, as I would always say, 30 plays of one. So they would do monologues. And then they would perform those at the Women's Project Theater. It was an extraordinary program. Very empowering, very impactful, literacy building, literacy skill building, public speaking skill building, teamwork. It was a great thing. So I had a structure, and that was the structure that I used with the first Breaking Walls. Because originally I did a workshop for the Brooklyn kids and the Palestinians.
Here in New York?
In Ida refugee camp in Palestine.
Oh, you took the Brooklyn kids to Palestine. Okay. What year was that?
2010.
Okay.
2010. So then they did the workshop.
And these Brooklyn kids were also from marginalized neighborhoods?
Yeah.
They were from poor families.
I wouldn't want to say poor, but they lived in Brooklyn, and they had, they'd experienced violence all around them, and, gang violence, and, single parent families and that kind of thing.
Okay. So they went with you to Palestine.
Right. And we did all of the writing there together. And then all of the Bethlehem artists and their chaperones came to Brooklyn. And we were able, the Atlantic was fantastic. They gave us studio space to rehearse. And then we used their stage 2 space for the performance.
Can you just repeat the name of that entity?
Yes, the Atlantic Theater Company.
Okay.
Which is one of the most respected and renowned, prestigious off-Broadway theaters in New York. So we had this experience, and that's where this conversation post-performance happened. So we had a structure. Now, it has evolved immensely and significantly since then. But when we went to Berlin in 2012, all of the Brooklyn and Bethlehem kids we were in a hostel. I mean, for them to be in that, any of them, to be in an environment where they were so safe.
It was a new experience.
Absolutely. And the next morning, as we went into the airport, one of the Brooklyn young men, I heard him, he didn't say it to anybody in particular. He just sort of under his breath, he said, here I go back to watching my back 24/7. And that made me realize that wherever we go, we need safety first. They need to be in an environment where they can just be free.
In a nutshell, if you were to explain to somebody who has never encountered breaking walls, can you summarize how breaking walls helps people to discover nonviolence inside themselves? Because I feel that's what it does.
Yes. At Breaking Walls, through the ensemble building, through the mindfulness, creative writing, the performance, and the sharing of life experiences together, the foundation is this. We are exploring the things that make us unique while celebrating the things that bind us together. And through that shared experience, the walls just melt. Because the trust is extraordinary. About 5 weeks ago on a Saturday, Breaking Walls did a workshop in Fall River, Massachusetts. 2 of our artists and 1 of our ambassadors traveled with me there. And we worked with 11 young people from the community who are experiencing a rough time. And it was amazing. Oh my gosh, it was so powerful. And for me, you know, you're together for 14 days. Yeah, you are going to bond. Do you know what I'm saying? And we're all in the same building and we're having meals together and we're all going to the same cultural experiences. Yes. To be together for 4.5 hours and watch these young men and women who came in very protected, and to be so powerfully impacted and connected in a positive way when they left. You know, group pictures and hugs and let's share Instagrams and all of that. And later that night, we were having this dinner afterwards, the adults. And one of the sponsors of one of the two groups of young people, he turned to me and he said, I was really skeptical about this afternoon and what could actually be accomplished. And he said, these kids walked in here and in 5 minutes, you had them working as a cohesive, trusting team. He said, I've never seen anything like it. Mm. And a friend of mine, when I shared that story with her, because I was like, wow. Because, you know, you don't know you're doing that. You know, this is how we start. Do you know what I'm saying? This is how we start. And she said, why do you think that is? And I said, you know, I don't know. Do I pick the right icebreakers at whatever it is? You know, the young people know that they're in a trusting environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is this what gives you confidence that such methods can also help with the tragic problem of the school shootings? Can you say something about that?
Yes.
Because there is a strong opinion in this country that the answer to the school shootings is to have more armaments in the system. And I know that you have other ideas. So can you say how you apply Ahimsa, nonviolence, to that social problem?
I can, and I have a very clear example. One of the things about breaking walls, or one of the impacts that our young people carry home with them, is the sense that having a trusting heart and an open mind has a powerful impact on you as an individual and also in your response to the others around you. And I see more and more and more that our young people step back into their school communities, their living communities, their churches, with that idea embodied in them. Now, we sign every year at the summit, we create our annual peace and acceptance statement, and everybody signs it and gets a copy. And I'm pleased to say that as our young people go back into their schools, not only by their own personal example, I'm hearing this from their classroom teachers, from building level administrators, that they come back and they're like, we need to get on student council. We need to be encouraging everyone to be more open and accepting. And one of our young women shared this story when we were in Tangier this summer. Egypt Murphy Smith from Brooklyn, that when she went to Barcelona in 2015, she was 16, never traveled abroad, was clearly one of the most popular, outstanding young people in her school. And she came back from breaking walls, and she and her friends were sitting together at lunch in the cafeteria, and it was a small school, so everybody had lunch at the same time. And she looked up just casually and spotted one other young person sitting alone at lunch. And she made up her mind in that moment, without any kind of let's have a cup. She was, that's wrong. And she said to her friends, come on, get up. And they all went over and sat down with this kid. And she said he didn't talk to them, but he also wasn't alone. And this year, after she shared that story with us, because we were talking about nonviolence and how to approach the others around us, since we'd had this extraordinary experience with 9 different communities together, and everybody was, so happy to be with each other and learning about new cultures and religions and personalities, and also that you fight with your sister and I do too. And we both love this particular artist. And both of us have struggled with depression. Do you know, it's really powerfully deep. She shared that story, and I approached her and I said, how would you feel if you took that idea and crafted it into a statement called Egypt's Pledge, that none of us, wherever we are, will ever allow anybody else to ever be alone if we have the opportunity to make a difference? And she said, great, and we all signed it.
Oh, this was in Egypt?
This was in Tangier in Egypt. It's called Egypt's Pledge because that's her name.
Okay.
So it's Egypt's Pledge. And then when we were in Cape Town this year, we were very fortunate because for the first time, we always work with Black, white, and colored young people. And this year we worked with young men and women who are recent immigrants because of the xenophobia. And when we finished that, we have a standard, I'm just going to move for a second. Download it from the internet. And this is what we've usually used until now. Now we are creating our own pledges that work in our own communities. And the Cape Town artists, we crafted a statement to stand up for the other. And it's really having a powerful impact. So does that answer your question?
It does, Fran. Can you say something for those people who across the world who may not ever have a chance to be physically part of your workshops? Can you give them a few ideas that they can easily work with that will help them to discover how viable nonviolence is? Because commonly people believe that nonviolence is for the Gandhis and saintly figures, and your work is showing that ordinary people can and are doing it. So can you just give a few, in a sense, tips?
The first thing that I would encourage everyone to do is don't always go with your first thought. I'm sure that all of us, myself included, have gone into a situation. Wait a minute. What's the next thought you might think? Instead of thinking, that person was really, really rude to me. Maybe I'm in a vulnerable place. So what they said really smacked me in a way that I wasn't expecting. Maybe they're in a really bad place today. And also, I just am now 27 feet beyond them. So why do I want to carry that with me anywhere today? Do you understand what I'm saying? Am I being clear? Mm-hmm. So I at least 3 times a day, I think one thing and then I think another thing and I'm like, oh, I'm going with thought number 2 because it just makes my day better.
Yeah.
One of the things that all of us have learned, myself as well as everyone involved in Breaking Walls, is it's really good to put the negativity that is in your life outside of yourself, either through some sort of meditation. Write it down. Pour it out somewhere. When we came back, so that's
Give me an example of negativity. What you mean by negativity?
That,
for example, like if you've hated a whole group of people or something?
Yes. Or something occurs and you went, that's why they say that about this religion, or that's why they say that about this culture. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
And then all of a sudden you're in prejudgment mode. You're in accepting stereotypes. And you don't know those people. Passing somebody on the metro, seeing them in a restaurant being noisy, you don't know them. You don't know them.
So this is an extension of the first one, that don't prejudge.
Don't prejudge.
Okay, what else?
And I would personally have a regimen to release the negativity, where you've prejudged or you feel judged, especially if you feel prejudged, where it's either a journal that you keep, you're drawing, you're going to a museum, you're going for a long walk, you're listening to music, whatever your regimen is, where you can release it. Because when it is captured in your soul and your heart, then it eats away. It's taking up the space that friendship could take, or success could take, or learning something new could take. So you want to make sure that your spirit and your heart and mind are ready to embrace the joy that can come to you, and the joy and the experiences that you're going to need to go forward, rather than holding you back. So when we are selecting the writing triggers especially, we're very cognizant that they are offering you the opportunity to open up the space that you've had locked, so that you can open it up, share it, have people comment on it and support it, like, I didn't realize that you'd been through that, I've been through that kind of thing. Or just saying, you're so brave. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Then that really spurs open conversation. It's like, wow, I always thought I was the only one who felt that way. I thought I was the only one who, this was something that was said this summer, I will never forget the moment I heard it. One of the Barcelona artists said that she and her parents are always standing at a window, looking out, and her parents see one thing and she sees something else. And I thought, oh my God, how true that is, that we are surrounded by people and we're all looking at the same thing, but our interpretations are different.
So what do we do with that?
Open dialogue, understand why your parents feel the way they do. And also being able to talk to the parents about, this is who your child is now, or this is why they believe what they believe. And I will say that one of the things I do, especially for the summits, not necessarily the community-based workshops and the in-school workshops, but definitely the summits, because I've had your child for 16 days. I call all the parents and ask, how are you doing? How's so-and-so, especially if they have some concerns. And every one of those parents will say, you found the girl I always knew was in there.
Oh.
Or you sent back my son, like, we love him, but he's feeling so vulnerable in the world, and you brought him back and he's so strong. And so all of a sudden, the young woman from Barcelona and her parents are beginning to see the same picture.
Beautiful.
Because, they're beginning to see the same picture.
So to close, Fran, I just want to ask a kind of macro question, that in a world where most people feel violence is growing, I know you don't believe that, so can you say why you don't share the view that violence is proliferating, and why you have hope?
First of all, my mindset personally has always been positive. So I've always seen the best in the situations and the people around me. So I believe that. But the other thing that really brings hope is not just the young men and women that I know. And right now, we're getting into the thousands of young people who have been through breaking walls. And that's going to only continue to expand. and the extraordinary men and women who come as volunteers to direct the theater piece and be our ensemble builder and be our director, our health and wellness ambassador, all of that. But also men and women like you and Dot Maver and Monica Willard and Iris Spelling and Ambassador Chowdhury and hundreds and thousands, Malawa, Greta Thunberg, men and women and young people who have a vision that our world is only going to change for the better. I mean, is it going to take work? Yes. Is it going to take time? Yes, with the exception of climate change. We don't have time. But that clock is ticking and we need to get on that. But that's why. Tomorrow, as I said, when we have our monthly check-in, our ambassador, Selena from Detroit, has designed what we're going to do as Breaking Walls, artists and ambassadors, to contribute to the Global Silent Minute next Saturday. And it's amazingly cool. And giving the power to young people to make those decisions and changes and feel empowered. Yeah, that's why. Because I see the hope and the resilience and the understanding and the depth and passion that young people have to make a difference and to have a better world than the one they're living in now. And adults. And that list that that's such a teeny list of the hundreds and thousands. The man who is creating this march through India to Geneva, God bless them. That's what we need, is people who are showing us the way to change our thought patterns and our reactions. As my father said, talk first and then, give them a little punch in the cheek, so that they stop the misbehavior. But you have to talk to people first. You can't go in first with, I'm angry.
Yes. Thank you so much, Fran, and all the best.